Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I thought I would start a new reading vlog today. It is a great time. It is the end of February and I have a big box of books sitting at my feet. These are the Women's Prize for Fiction longlisted books. This long list is announced on Tuesday the 4th of March. They have very kindly sent me review copies early so I can get stuck in with reading. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that I've been reading the entire long list for many years now, and the shortlist even longer than that. I think I've been reading the shortlist every year since 2016, and in more recent years the long list too. I also do this with the Booker Prize as well, so these reading vlogs tend to be quite long. Grab a cup of tea, pull up a seat and join me. You're probably seeing this video, I hope you are seeing this video just before the shortlist is announced, but it is a really quick turnaround this year. Less than a month between the announcement of the long list and the shortlist. Time is short. I have a 1-year-old. I am doing parenting full-time and slotting this in the evenings, like reading and other work that I'm doing. So we will see how we get on. I'm gonna have to be quite cutthroat, I think. If I am not enjoying a book, life is too short and I will move on to the next title. But hopefully there will be lots to enjoy in this box. I'm really excited. I don't want this section to be too long because if you follow the prize, by the time you're seeing this video, you already know what's on the long list. But I don't know what's on yet right this second. So any predictions from me? I think maybe the new Hollyborn might be in there. Maybe Nesting. I've heard lots of good things about Nesting. Wouldn't be surprised to see Elizabeth Strout, Miranda July, probably lots of other titles that have suddenly just exited my brain as if I'd never read a book in my life. Okay, right. Let's put us all out of our misery. Well, me, you already know what's in this box, and dive into the books. I will briefly, hopefully just a sentence or two, tell you about each book because I haven't read them yet, and I'm going to be talking about them in depth as the video progresses anyway, so you don't need to know a whole amount right now. Okay, right, let's go into the box. Okay, we have a book I have never heard of before. This is exciting. I like it when there are undiscovered, for me, books on a long list. So we've got Birding by Ruane. This is a story about two women. It's set in a gentrifying, rundown seaside resort town, which always intrigues me. I think this is a queer novel too. One of the narrators is Lydia, who was a teen pop star, and Joyce, who's now in middle age, who has never left home and still lives with her mother. It says, Birding asks if we can ever see ourselves clearly or if we are always the unreliable narrators of our own experiences. That sounds great. Sign me up. Yes, please. I did guess this one. So this is Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell, and this I think is about a woman who leaves an abusive husband with her kids, and I imagine it is going to be quite stressful, but I am really looking forward to reading this one. Next we have one of my most anticipated releases. I will link my most anticipated 2025 releases video in the description box down below. This is The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami. I haven't read any of her books before, but this one is a dystopian book where you can be arrested for dreaming about committing a crime, I think, or just dreaming something that's not appropriate, and then they can put you in a detention centre to atone for the things that you haven't done yet, or just your thoughts, which you may never have acted on. It's giving me The Centre by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui, which was one of my favourite books a couple of years ago. So let's see if this one is as good as that. Next up we have a book that I have never heard of before. This is Somewhere Else by Jenni Daiches. This is a very small press, it's Scotland Street Press, and it's got a quote on it from Miriam Margoyle, so I don't know if this is a humorous book, I'm not sure. It says, Rosa Roshkin is 5 years old when her family are murdered in a pogrom. I mean, that doesn't sound funny, and she is forced to leave behind everything she knows with only her suitcase of clothes and her father's violin. Doesn't give much away. I look forward to reading it and seeing what I think. Then we do have the Elizabeth Strout. We have Tell Me Everything. Now, is this part of, yes, it is part of her canon, I guess. All of her novels are linked, aren't they? I think. Because we have a mention of Lucy and Olive Kitteridge. Yeah, so all of these interconnect. And that always has intimidated me a little bit, but a book of hers was shortlisted for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago and I read it. I can't remember which one it was now. Was it My Name is Lucy Barton? Possibly. I will insert the cover of whichever one it was here. And I read that and didn't feel like I was missing out on all the other books that I hadn't read. They do seem to stand on their own 2 feet, which is very important in prizes. You can't rely on sequels, etc. So yeah, this one is set in autumn in Maine, and it's about the town lawyer Bob Burgess, who has become enmeshed in an unfolding murder investigation. All right, so again, look forward to that. I have seen people talk about this one, but actually I know nothing about it. This is fundamentally by Nusaba Yunus. It says that Nadia is an academic who's been disowned by her puritanical mother and dumped by her lover Rosie. She decides to make a getaway, accepting a UN job in Iraq. Tasked with rehabilitating ISIS women, Nadia becomes mired in the opaque world of international aid, surrounded by bumbling colleagues. It says it is bitingly original, wildly funny, an exploration of love, family, religion, and the decisions we make in pursuit of belonging. This is another small press I don't think I've read from before. This is Weatherglass Books, and it's Saraid de Silva's Amma. This is a book that says it's set in Sri Lanka, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, and London. It starts out, I think, in 1951 in Singapore, when 10-year-old Josephina kills her abuser. I am not always a huge fan of books that span multiple generations, which this says it does, and across many different countries, because it's very difficult to pull that off. So I look forward to seeing if this book feels satisfying when I read it, or if it feels a bit too ambitious. As predicted, All Fours by Miranda July. I am just wrapping up at the moment a Reading Other Booktubers' Favourite Books of the Year reading vlog, and this was one of the books that was on the TBR for that video, so I think I may end that video because I want to get stuck into these books and read that book for this one instead. But this is about a woman who I think is supposed to be going on a work trip, and she's going to drive across the US, but instead of actually doing that, she only drives half an hour down the road and then stays in a motel for 2 weeks, and I think it's a bit outrageous. I've never read a Miranda July before, which is faintly ridiculous, so I look forward to rectifying that. Then we have Aria Aber's Good Girl. It's got a quote on the front from Cafe Akbar, which is very promising. It says, in Berlin's artistic underground, where techno and drugs fill warehouses still pockmarked from the wars of the 20th century, 19-year-old Neela finds her tribe. Born in Germany to Afghan parents, raised in public housing graffitied with swastikas, drawn to philosophy, photography and sex, Neela has spent her adolescence disappointing her family while searching for her voice. I look forward to reading a book set in Berlin. My eyes are so much bigger than my stomach at the moment because I want to be reading all the things, and as I said, I really don't have much time at the moment. But one of the International Booker Prize longlisted books is also set in Berlin, and I may have requested a review copy of that. For some reason that really appeals to me right now. Anyway, sounds good. Onto the pile it goes. Okay, next one is one I haven't heard of before. This is Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings. So this is set in Cape Town, where water is rationed and has to be collected from trucks each day, with the consequences of apartheid and the ending of it still evident. Deirdre lives from day to day in squalor, a squalor largely created by herself, borrowing, persuading her way from the water trucks to the bar, testing the tolerance and pity of everyone she knows, until the police take her back to her family home. A short one as well. Okay, then we've got The Persians by Sanam Mahloudji. I have seen a few people haul this, but I don't think I've seen reviews of it yet. I know this is a funny book. Funny books can be quite difficult, right? Because you really have to align with the sense of humour. If you don't, then there's just a big distance between you and the text. This is about 5 women from 3 generations of a once illustrious Iranian family as their lives are turned upside down. So we'll see if I gel with the humour in this. Oh, then we have The Safekeep by Yael van der Woden, which was longlisted, shortlisted. My brain has escaped me. Anyway, it was on the Booker Prize last year and I read it and really loved it. I will do a summary of my feelings of it partway through this vlog. We'll get into that later, but very pleased to see that here. Then we've got A Little Trickery by Rosanna Pike, which I have not heard of before. This is set in medieval England, and that doesn't always appeal to me. I'm not discounting this book, but if I saw it in a bookshop, it wouldn't be one that I gravitated towards. It says, born a vagabond, Tib Ingleby has never had a roof of her own, but her mother has taught her that if you're not too bound by the big man's rules, there are many ways a woman can find shelter in this world. Now her ma is dead, in a trick gone wrong, and young Tib is orphaned and alone. So it says that it is a deeply moving portrayal of a side of Tudor England rarely seen. Okay, I'll give it a go. Another one I haven't heard of, we've got The Artist by Lucy Steeds. It's set in Provence in 1920 about Etty, who moves through the remote farmhouse, silently creating the conditions that make her uncle's artistic genius possible. And Joseph, an inspiring journalist, has been invited to the house. He believes he'll make his name by interviewing the reclusive painter who lives there. Okay, that doesn't immediately grab me, but not discounting it. We'll see how I get on with it. Oh, okay, then we have final two, The Ministry of Time. Now, you know, this was everywhere last year, and for some reason it just did not appeal to me, and I don't know why, because it has a quote on the front from Max Porter, and I trust Max, you know, implicitly, so I have no idea why I thought this wouldn't be a book that I liked. It says a boy meets a girl, the past meets the future, a finger meets a trigger, the beginning meets the end, England is forever, England must fall. It's set in a near future about a disaffected civil servant who's offered a lucrative job in a mysterious new government ministry, gathering expats from across history to test the limits of time travel. Maybe it's the time travel thing, because I don't always get on with that. But you know, I'm going to see how I get on with it in this one. And then finally we have Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who is obviously a massive part of the Women's Prize, won the Best of the Prize a few years ago. I won't be reading this one because it's tricky. Everyone has to make their own decisions when it comes to separating art from artist, but her commentary on trans issues and on J.K. Rowling, etc. over the past few years has made me deeply uncomfortable and has made me not really want to engage with her work. That is my personal decision. You may disagree with it. You may want to go and read it. You do you, I'll do me, but this is not one I will be reading in this vlog. Okay, so this is quite an exciting long list. There are some books that I am surprised not to see there. I forgot to mention The Axeman's Carnival by Catherine Chidgey, which I thought would be on this long list. But I wonder if maybe thematically it's a bit too similar by Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell. Maybe they didn't want to have both on the list. I'm not sure. Who knows? You'll never know when it comes to judging rooms and judging decisions. But okay, all right. I think I might start with Nesting because I've been itching to get to that one. We are going to go for a walk today to Hampstead Heath, so I'll insert some B-roll footage of that here. And then I will come back to you and talk to you about the books once I've got stuck in with reading. I'm excited. All right, see you soon. It's a couple of days later. I finished reading Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell. I don't remember when I was last so stressed when reading a book. Possibly when I was reading Paul Lynch's novel. So it's been a few years, but brilliantly stressful, as in I was living this alongside the characters and oh my goodness. Okay, let's talk about it. But first off, I have to give a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is Serious Readers. Serious Readers is a small UK-based company and they make the best reading lights, in my opinion. And I've been working with them for the past 4 years because I love what they do and I'm so thankful that they support this channel. They make reading lights, as I said, this is one of them. This is one of their high definition lights. It's a floor light. You can also get it as a table light if you would prefer. They invented something called daylight wavelength technology, which mimics daylight as closely as possible, which means you can read more comfortably for longer. And I particularly appreciate that as someone who has relatively scratched corneas because of the disability that I have, but you don't need to have a disability related to your eyesight in order to want a good reading light. That's just an extra added thing for me, and maybe for a few other people who are watching. I honestly couldn't go back to reading without it. If this broke tomorrow, I would buy a new one with my own money, because I think that it is just excellent. And if you would like to check them out, if you're in the market for a new reading light, I will link them in the description box down below. You can use the code JEN to get yourself £150 off a high definition light and free UK delivery. The code also works outside of the UK, you just don't get the free delivery bit. And yeah, thanks so much to them for sponsoring this video, and in general, just being lovely people who make excellent things. All right, now back to this book that stressed me out so much. I'm gonna put this down actually and insert the cover here so I don't have to keep holding it. I listened to this one on audio for the majority, but I was going back to the physical book so that I could make notes and underline things. And this book is brilliant, but just because a book is brilliant doesn't always mean the audiobook will be brilliant. But I can confidently say that both physical form and audiobook form of the story are superb. So this is about a woman called Kara who decides that she is going to leave her marriage. It is an abusive marriage, but because it's primarily emotional abuse, whenever she's left in the past, she then convinces herself that it was in her head and she made it up, because she has been gaslit so much by her husband. I felt gaslit when I was reading this book. It's, as I said, so tense. She's got two small children called Ella and Sophie. She's also pregnant with her third child when she decides to leave at the beginning of this book, which makes everything even more stressful. But her kids are a light relief in this book, even though obviously them being there makes everything feel more weighted. But they say the most delightful and realistic things. One of the things I wrote down, when they leave at the beginning, they go stay in the hotel, and their mum says, "See, isn't this nice? It's like a wee holiday." And Sophie said, "Oh, you mean like when we went to the caravan park in Portrush with Granny and Ella got sick and we were too small for all the rides and everyone cried." Just, yes, the honesty of children and the questions that they ask, because they're really obsessed with learning animal facts. So they ask things like, do sharks have chins? They need to know all of the important things. And them, I think, being obsessed with learning animal facts is them subconsciously wanting to learn about other family structures in different species, and also survival tactics, which I suppose, when you think about it, is quite desperately sad. The title of this book, Nesting, it's about creating a home. And yes, that nesting feeling when you're pregnant and wanting to make sure that everything is in perfect order, but this has been transposed into Kara's everyday life. When things at home are bad, she wants to make sure that things are clean and neat and tidy, because maybe if she makes sure that there are no mistakes anywhere, then her husband won't be angry with her. But of course, that's not really how it works. It's about her wanting to be the house, the safe space for her kids. And she literally is that for her unborn baby at the beginning of the book, because that baby is housed inside her. And there are various points where she feels like she has become the house. Let me find a quote that I wrote down. Handshaking, still holding the check J-cloth. Lemony fairy liquid, blood pounding in her ears, deafening. She has become the house. The toppled chair, the smashed bulb, the broken handle, her bones and blood. She swats at the light over the oven. The shocked kitchen stares back. I love that personification of the house also watching what's going on. It is the only witness to what is going on, which is why leaving is so difficult, because no one else can see what is going on in their household. Going back to that title of Nesting, of embodying a home, of being a house, this book explores psychogeography in that way. And her children often ask her if she will make a house for them, as in build a fort, which reflects like that mini child's play version of what is going on in the adult world. And that child's play, I think, reflects how Kiara feels about other people's relationships. She thinks that being happy and having a secure home is child's play for other people. Other people seem to find it so easy, and she's constantly thinking, why can't I do that, and what is wrong with me? This book examines the bureaucracy of shelters, of refuge, of care, and I thought it handled that so well. There are also themes of learning new languages. Kara is a language teacher, so learning how to, I guess, without wanting to sound cliched, learning how to find her voice, to speak out against what has been happening to her. And there is some maybe too on the nose imagery related to that, and also to trapped birds and birds in cages and setting them free, which obviously links back to the title of Nesting. I did think that was maybe a little bit too, as I said, on the nose, but because the rest of the book is so brilliant, I found myself just forgiving it. Didn't matter. I do think that there are similarities, a lot of similarities between this and Axman's Carnival by Catherine Chidgey, which I mentioned in the introduction. So I can see why both of them aren't on this list together. But I just absolutely adored this book. In fact, there was one point when I was listening to it where I literally shouted, no, don't do that. No. And my husband was like, are you okay? What's happening? I'm like, this is a very critical moment. Shush, please. I need to be listening. It was so intense. How many times have I said intense, stressful? Quite a few, but I just need to get that point across. My goodness me. Such a brilliant book. If this is not on my favorites from the entire list, then this is going to be a very impressive list. But so far, I mean, what an amazing start. Absolutely loved it. I think the book that I will go to next on audio is going to be The Ministry of Time. And in physical form, I'm going to pick up the Elizabeth Strout to read, I think, which is called Tell Me Everything. I'm going to go into the kitchen now. I need to make my daughter's birthday cake. I have found a recipe that I trialed earlier in the week. It's like a healthy birthday cake. So it is banana, almond flour, cinnamon and eggs, and that's it. And so I need to make the sponges for that. I think I'm going to make 4, they're very little sponges, they're 4-inch cake tins, so I'm going to make 4 of those for tomorrow, and then I can assemble it then, and hopefully it won't be too much of a disaster. But if it is, I'm sure she won't care, and I'm sure it will taste nice too. So that's what I'm going to go do now, and I will check back in with you when I have read some more. Hello, it is 10 days later, maybe nearly 2 weeks later actually. I think it's 2 weeks later. So I have failed on the updating you part, but I have not failed. Sorry, this chair is making a noise. I have not failed on the reading part, which I think is probably the most important part. I hope that you feel that way too. So I'm here with a mammoth update. I am more than halfway through now, I think. So we have got lots of stuff to catch up on. But first, the birthday cake that I mentioned in the last clip was a success. It was really cute. It was a 4-inch cake tin, and I actually did 4 tiers, and then when I was putting it together I realised that was silly and it was going to fall over. So it was a 3-tier cake, and I think I said in the last clip it was just banana, almond flour, egg, cinnamon and baking powder, and it came out really delicious for the ingredients that it was. It just tasted like banana bread, really. I will link the recipe in the description box down below if you are looking for a healthy-ish birthday cake for a young person in your life. And yes, her birthday was lovely, very chill. We got her a tongue drum, which is kind of like a cross between a xylophone and a steel drum. And the really good thing about it is that it sounds great even if you're just whacking it. And you can't say that for most instruments in the world. So that was why I decided to go for that one. And yes, it is a gift for her, but also a gift for me, because I'm finding it really therapeutic and nice to play. So I will insert a clip here so that you can see what the tongue drum is like if you've never seen one before. So yes, that was a couple of weeks ago, and since then, just life has been happening, life has been lifing, work stuff has been a little bit, it's all been a little bit of a lot, because I am parenting on my own throughout the day and then working in the evenings, and we have been doing, just to update you on what's going on in work life in case you happen to be interested, we've been doing the audiobook for, well, I was going to say my new book, our new book, because it's a collective effort, which is called Owning It, Tales from Our Disabled Childhoods in Our Own Words. That's coming out next month now, the 24th of April, and I'm so excited about it because I've been working on it since
2021. It's been a really long time. I think I touched on it briefly in a previous video, but if you missed that, I basically did an event with James Catchpole, who has written a book called What Happened to You, and he also wrote one called You're So Amazing. His wife Lucy wrote a book called Mama Car, and I love them and they're great, and they run a literary agency. And I think one of their taglines is that they have more children than working legs, and they are just great literary folk, and we bond over books and disability stuff. Anyway, I was chairing an event online for James's first book, and then we started talking afterwards about how disappointing it was that we didn't have books by disabled authors to read when we were disabled kids. And then we thought, well, we could do something about that for future generations. So we decided to put together an anthology of pieces of writing by disabled authors who were also once disabled kids, writing about whatever they wanted to write about: school, friendship, holidays, hospitals, anything and everything. And it's full of disability joy and also discussions on ableism. Some of the pieces are really funny, some of them are quite emotional, and it has been such a privilege to put this book together. I've really loved doing it. And yeah, we've been working on it for 4 years, and it's being published by Faber next month. I'm so thrilled that Faber are publishing it. And there was always going to be an audiobook for it. That was a deal breaker for me when we were approaching and pitching to publishers, because this book has to be accessible. I have fought so hard for audiobooks for my other books in the past, and they're expensive to produce. And if you're doing something niche, say like poetry, which is one of the things that I write, is very difficult to get an audiobook version done. But for this book, we were going to need an audiobook. There was like no ifs, ands or buts. There was going to be one. It was just a case of thinking how we were going to do it. And what we decided to do in the end, we collectively, Faber, us, decided that we would produce it ourselves. And there are 22 contributors in the book, and they're all around the world. So instead of getting some people to go into studios and some people to record at home, we've just got everybody to record at home, because I think it's lovely when listening to an audiobook, especially one that's on personal topics, to hear the author reading it themselves. So wherever possible, everyone is reading their own pieces. That hasn't been something that has been possible for every single person. So I've recorded a couple, and James has also recorded a couple, but most people have been able to record their own pieces, which is just really lovely. So that's what I've been working on in the evenings. I've been using my podcast mic, and I've had my duvet over my head, huddled like I'm in some kind of little cave or fort that I've created for myself. And I have been recording the audio of my piece and also a couple of other pieces, and then editing them. I know that Faber can also edit the audio, and they are doing that for most people, but I'm so used to editing my own stuff that I was like, I'm just gonna edit mine too. So that's what my evenings have been filled with. And as wonderful as this anthology is, and I'm so excited to share it with you all, that the amount of work that goes into, you know, coordinating 22 different people on lots of different elements is a lot, on top of other work and childcare. So I have been feeling that recently, but it has been a joy, and I would love for you to pre-order the book if you haven't already pre-ordered it. This is it here, Owning It, Tales from Our Disabled Childhoods in Our Own Words. The audiobook is not yet available for pre-order, but it will be soon, and it will also be out as an ebook as well. So paperback, audio, ebook, lovely stuff. Very excited about it. I'll share more nearer the time, but that time is fast approaching. Anyway, we are not here to talk about that, are we? But you know, I like to have a chat. We're here to talk about the books that I have been reading. Can you see? So I have been reading quite a lot, and I have thoughts. So we should probably dive in. I was going to say just dive in. I've been meandering a lot. Now we should just dive in. Should we start with the DNFs? I feel like that's probably a good thing to do. So I think I mentioned in the last clip I was going to start reading Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley, and I did. This is a time travel novel, but that's, I would say, not really what the book is about at all. The premise is time travel, but I quite like how tongue-in-cheek the author was, gliding over the concept of time travel at the beginning. Basically, they say, you know, in books and films, when creators try and get bogged down in the logistics of time travel, and it just sounds so unrealistic because it's such a complicated thing. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to say we're time traveling, and I thought that was quite funny. So this is about a government body who has decided that they are going to save people from the past, people who would have died in their own timelines so they won't be missed, and bring them into the present day. And people who work at the government have been assigned as like carers for these time refugees, which is what some people refer to them as, to help them get used to being in the 21st century. That's the premise. My issue with this book is that I didn't really feel as though it knew what genre it was. It's kind of a little bit of everything, and sometimes that's fine and I don't mind it, but I found it a little bit frustrating. I think it reminded me a little bit of the TV show Loki, which I really wanted to like, but I just thought was a little bit all over the place. This kind of hops from theme to theme, discussing homophobia, discussing racism and colonialism, and I really enjoyed all of those discussions, but it definitely felt as though it was discussion over character and plot, at least to me. And again, I don't always mind that, because Ali Smith does that a lot and I love her novels, but for some reason didn't work for me here. I thought it had quite a few clunky metaphors. Sometimes it had lovely writing that worked, but on the whole wasn't really my writing style. Perhaps a little bit like the book Exit West, which for me had a brilliant premise, but the payoff wasn't particularly there. I just found this book a little bit boring. So I read about a third of it, I think, and then I decided to part ways with it. My next DNF was A Little Trickerie by Rosanna Pike, and I was super surprised that I DNF'd this one because the beginning of this book made me sob. Like, I cried my eyes out as I was washing the dishes. It was intense. And I think sometimes when a book has a real emotional impact like that, we can equate that with it being a really good book. And I'm not saying that those two things can't coexist, obviously they can, but I think, you know, we can just, because we've had that connection, we attribute things to the rest of the book that aren't really there. And that became apparent to me the more I read it. I thought at the beginning, like, oh, this is brilliant. And then it became less brilliant the more and more I read. The thing that's really strong about this one is the voice. So this is a medieval book. It's about a young girl called Tib Ingleby, and she is just a wonderful character. I think I'll remember her for quite a long time, and I listened to this one on audio and the narration is brilliant, definitely heightens her voice. It's not written phonetically, but it is written in a conversational tone, as if she's speaking to you, or rather as if she's speaking to herself, because she talks to herself in the third person. That's very endearing and it pulls you in very quickly. As I said, something very emotional happens at the beginning of the book. Tib basically loses her home and her family. That happens within the first few pages, and this is her setting out into the world, completely lost, trying to find a new home. The thing that is frustrating about this is that Tib is a very naive person, a very naive character, and consequently you as a reader always know what's happening. You can always see 5 steps ahead. I think that's a deliberate literary device here, but because that doesn't really change, it just got, to me, so annoying. I don't want to know what's going to happen all the time. I don't want to think that the true nature of the characters around the main character is perfectly obvious and you're just waiting for her to cotton on. It's kind of infuriating and also feels a little bit patronising to the reader after a certain point. The writing itself is also a little bit too sentimental as Tib comes to understand what's going on. And I'm going to give you an example. I've written down a note here. Okay, page 38. Let's see what is on page 38. In the evening, those stars are brighter than I have seen them on account of the no-cloud sky. They are blinking up there like a million cat eyes, and those thoughts of roofs are crawling back like when Ma was here. It is strange, Ivo. My Ma was looking for a roof for us ever since I can remember, and I did not want that thing too, and yet I should say that this covered in stars roof is the best one I ever had, and it is not really a roof at all. Ivo reaches for my hand. I think your Ma was not looking so much for a roof, but for a home. That is not making any sense, since surely the two are exactly the same. Ivo rolls on his side to face me. I should say your Ma wanted to find somewhere she belonged, or someone she belonged to. Now I am doing the thinking. So, are you saying that perhaps a home does not need a roof? Perhaps not, Tib. And besides, home can be a person as much as a place. Well, I think that you are my home then, Ivo. He looks all watery in those lovely eyes and he says, and you are mine, Tib. Maybe I'm dead inside, but no. No, no, no. I'm just editing this clip and I'm just hopping on to say that I meant to say that when I was really enjoying this book at the beginning, it strongly reminded me of The Butcher's Hook by Janet Ellis, which was one of my favourite books back in like 2015. You may remember me raving about that one if you were around here at that time. So if you like it, and also if you like Kirsty Logan's Now She Is Witch, I feel like it is those two books blended together. So if that appeals to you, you might want to check it out. Okay, so that was a DNF for me. And then my final DNF so far, before we move on to ones that I did not DNF and have enjoyed, was Good Girl by Aria, Aber. And I was excited about this one because it's a book set in Berlin. And as I mentioned, for some reason, I've been itching to read a book set in Berlin. I have no idea why. I visited there 10 years ago now and enjoyed myself. So maybe I was just feeling nostalgic. But yeah, this one was not for me either, but for different reasons. This is about a woman called Neela who lives in Berlin. As I said, her parents are from Afghanistan. She has grown up in Germany. She really loves partying, drinking, taking drugs. She's looking for love, and by her own admission, she at least feels that she's always been a disappointment to her parents. She is looking for love and she becomes infatuated with this not very nice man, a writer, an American writer called Marlowe, who is much older than her. And he exerts a certain control over her. And this is definitely supposed to be a metaphor for white, toxic masculinity and like Western narratives, not just his voice, but also the fact that he makes money from the stories that he's published and how he tries to control her voice. And I liked all of the conversations that were going on either directly on the page or dancing around the page to do with immigration and rising racial tensions and a rise in fascism. But I did not really enjoy the pretentious discussions about art and literature, which they had quite a lot, and then all of the partying that was going on too. I don't think the balance was really there for me personally. It feels a little bit like a Sally Rooney novel set in Berlin with all of these extra conversations to do with family and community, and I wanted more of the family and community rather than the angsty, drunken stuff that was going on the rest of the time. So I decided to part ways with this one too. I would recommend it for fans of Fire Rush, which was shortlisted I think for the Women's Prize a couple of years ago, and which I did enjoy, but I kind of had similar feelings about too. My daughter has woken from her nap, so I do not have time to speak to you about the books that I have finished and enjoyed, so I will check back in with you. For you it will be 1 second, but for me it will probably be tomorrow. As predicted, it is the next day. Let us talk about the books that I have read and really enjoyed. So, I read Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. I read this one in physical form. This is part of a series of books. I read one of them pre-booktube, or tried to, I actually DNF'd it, which was Olive Kitteridge, and I didn't enjoy it. But I think if I read that now, I really would. I just clearly wasn't drawn to that kind of writing style back in the day. And I read another one in the series a couple of years ago, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, called Oh William. So these books are about a series of people. We've got Lucy Barton, we've got Olive Kitteridge, and it's about how their lives just intersect every so often across the decades. They're super cozy, really easy to slip into. And I don't mean that in any kind of demeaning way, like as in these are easy reads. They're deceptively easy. A lot of hard work and craft has gone into making these appear effortless. It feels like you are being expertly directed, like looking over a town and you zoom in on a house and then out again, you see a character walking down the street, the narrator tells you where to focus, and you really just feel like you're at home. You're aware that there's some extra context going on from other books that you don't know, but you don't feel as though you're particularly missing out. And I think that one of the reasons for that is because Lucy Barton, one of the main characters, is a writer, and especially in the book Oh William, she talks a lot about writing and what it's like to bring characters to life. So the whole thing just feels quite meta, and I enjoy that a lot. Now, something judges have to think about when it comes to prizes is whether or not a book that's part of a series stands on its own 2 feet, whether it merits being longlisted, shortlisted, or winning completely on its own merit. And sometimes judges seem to forget that, like when the Testaments won the Handmaid's Tale, like when the Testaments won the Booker Prize with Bernardine Evaristo a few years ago. I would strongly argue that that is a book that heavily relies on its prequel, The Handmaid's Tale, in order for you to get the emotional impact that you're going to get if you've read the prequel. If you haven't, The Testaments is, well, I don't think a book that really should have been longlisted, shortlisted, won the Booker Prize. Who am I to be saying these things? This is just my opinion, but I feel like a lot of people also shared that opinion. So that's an example of a book that maybe should not have been part of a list. Should this one be part of a list? In my opinion, I think yes. Do I think it should win? No, but I can see why it has been longlisted, and I would be perfectly happy to see it being shortlisted too. The only thing that I felt like I was missing, I think, when I was reading this book is background on Olive Kitteridge's character. Maybe that's only because I know there is a book that is named after her. If I didn't know that book existed, would I think I was missing out? I am not sure, but that's the only bit. When I was reading the parts with Olive Kitteridge in, I thought, I want to know more about you, and I don't think I'm going to find that out in here. But hey, sometimes I feel that about characters in books where there are no sequels or prequels or anything, and it's just, you know, you can't know everything about every character in a title, and I guess that is okay. So what is this book about, Jen? This is about a man called Bob Burgess, who is a lawyer. Bob meets up with Lucy Barton, who, as I said, is a writer, and they have walks and they talk about their feelings about life and their respective partners. And Lucy has also been going to visit a woman called Olive Kitteridge. Olive has summoned her to her home because she wants to give Lucy stories. She wants to tell her stories in the hope that Lucy's going to turn one of them into a book, and then Olive can take credit for it, because that's the kind of person Olive is. The point of this book, really, as I was reading it, is just thinking about the complexities of people, like how complex people are and how we only scratch the surface of who they are. And I think also that the theme of this book, characters constantly feeling misunderstood, feeling like other people in the book don't see their full selves, feeds into this being a book that's part of a series that I haven't read the rest of. You know, that felt quite comforting. It felt really fitting, like, oh yes, there are other things that I haven't read and maybe I'm not getting the whole picture, but that's how the characters in this book feel about themselves and other people, so it all makes sense. And on that theme, I'm going to give you such a niche reference right now. Reading this book feels like watching the Eli Scruggs episode of Desperate Housewives. If you know what I'm talking about, then you and me have some knowledge that other people don't have, in the same way that people who've read the whole series have knowledge that I don't have about the other books. So the episode of Desperate Housewives that I'm talking about is a really bizarre one where we're introduced to this character called Eli Scruggs, who is a handyman, and he works for all of the women who live on the street, and he dies. And all of the housewives, Brie, Susan, Gabrielle, Lynette, all of them think about memories that they have had that involve Eli, and so we get to learn more about the individual characters through these memories. It's like this one-off weird flashback episode. If you watched that episode and you had no idea who these women were, you would get some kind of insight into who they are, and I think it would feel quite complete because it was its own storytelling arc, that individual episode, but it's obviously part of a greater whole. That's how I felt when I read this book. Like, Bob Burgess was Eli Scruggs. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you do, let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, this is really just a book about people feeling a little bit lost, a little bit lonely. In fact, the book tells you what the point of the book is. Shall I tell you? It's on page 225. I made a note to myself. Page 225, here we go. Oh my God, Lucy said. She sat up straight. And then she said, so what's the point of this story? Pauline should have married the already married fisherman. Olive laughed. She really laughed at that. Lucy Barton, the stories you told me, as far as I could tell, had very little point to them. Okay, maybe they had subtle points to them. I don't know what the point is to this story. People, Lucy said quietly, leaning back. People and the lives they lead. That's the point. Exactly. Olive nodded. That's the point. Learning little stories about people and the lives they lead, and being content with having a piece of the whole. And yeah, I really liked it. I enjoyed it. It felt very
comforting. Next up, I read Fundamentally by Nasaba Yunus, which I listened to on audio. Would very much recommend the audio. It is about a woman called Nadia, who's recently been dumped by her girlfriend Rosie. She's also been ostracized by her family since she abandoned her faith as a Muslim. And so she decides to run away from her life and take this job on opportunity that she has been offered to de-radicalize / rehabilitate ISIS women in Baghdad. And this is written by someone who has first-hand experience of doing that job. The tone of this book is really interesting. So we've got this really jarring thing going on of a very serious topic, but a very funny book. So if I was going to do some kind of clumsy book maths, I would say think of the film Four Lions and also the book The Bandit Queens by Perini Shroff, which was longlisted for the Women's Prize a couple of years ago and was a lot of fun, but was also about very heavy topics. I didn't write many notes when I was listening to this one. I was just enjoying listening to it. I didn't feel like there was a lot to get really analytical about in a literary way. That's just the nature of this particular kind of book and its writing style. And I think for me personally, there are pros and cons to that. But it was, as I said, very funny when Nadia discovered especially that she got to Baghdad and she thought she was going to have loads of support for this program. She'd written an article basically about how she would go about rehabilitating ISIS women, and then she was approached about this job and she thought, oh great, this is a project people care about and there's going to be a lot of thought and effort being put into this, but it's just a lot of bureaucratic nonsense. And it just turns out that she's been hired because no one else wants to do this job or has thought about it in any way, shape or form, and she just ends up feeling very deflated when she gets there. I would say bureaucracy is a huge theme in this year's list, which is really interesting. It was a theme in Nesting, it's also a theme in The Dream Hotel, it was a theme in Good Girl as well. Sometimes prizes have consciously, subconsciously, some kind of theme uniting a lot of the titles, and I would say that is the theme that brings a lot of these books together this year. I thought the ending was a little bit over the top and I couldn't really get on board with the resolutions, which felt maybe a little bit too neat. I don't know, but I did really enjoy myself, so I will give it a thumbs up for that. There's lots to love about this, but as I said, it's probably not going to be an absolute favourite. I'm going to have to disappear again, so I will catch up with you tomorrow about The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami. Dare I say that spring is on the way. It is warmer today. The hellebores are out in the garden and we planted some amelanchias at the bottom. I say at the bottom of the garden. Our garden is a little square. So on one side of the square we planted some amelanchias last summer and they're starting to bud, so they'll be in flower probably in the next couple of weeks, which is very exciting. Very exciting also, book post this morning. I got a final copy of Owning It, our new book, which as I mentioned earlier in the video is out next month. It is a chunky one, very excited. Always really weird, I feel the need to do this. It smells good if anyone's wondering. Always really weird to hold finished copy of a book that you have written, or in this case written part of and edited, in your hands. It just makes it feel very real. So as I mentioned before, if you would like to pre-order, that would be lovely. Links are in the description box down below. Out in paperback, ebook and audio on the 24th of April. Okay, so a quick book update from me because my partner is off work this morning and I am treating myself to a smear test. Lucky me. But I do feel quite good about this in that I have not cheated the system, but I have tried to make the system work for me. You know what it's like getting GP appointments. It's difficult, so I had to plan this very far in advance, but I've managed to schedule a smear test, a blood test, because I had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant, so I need to be checked for diabetes every year, and also just a general appointment on the same morning, all with different people. Now, this could go brilliantly or it could just be really stressful, because if one of them is inevitably late, then I'm just going to be sitting in the waiting room thinking, am I going to make my other appointments? But fingers crossed. I believe in the universe this morning. I'm going to believe in the universe. I have given myself some buffer room. But yeah, I feel mega efficient about this, going to the GPs for 3 separate things all in one morning. I love a bit of good organisation. Let's hope it pays off. Right, so before I go and do that, I'm going to talk to you about The Dream Hotel. Where is that? It is here.
So The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami was one of my most anticipated books of 2025, and I really, really enjoyed it. I listened to this one on audio, and currently Mr. M and I are watching the new series of Severance in the evenings, and as I mentioned before, when I watched the first season, I'm looking for books that kind of have that similar feel to it, and this one massively does. I would say the second season of Severance has veered more towards Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I don't mind at all. This one feels very much like first season of Severance. What's it about? This is about a woman called Sarah who is detained at the airport, and she's told that her risk score is too high. Everyone has a risk score, people's dreams are being monitored, and if the government feels that they're at risk for committing a crime, then they are detained and sent to a detention centre. There will be a trial, and if they deem that this person should be held for longer, then they will be. It's particularly stressful because she has two 13-month-old twins, and she is taken away from them, and she's told it will be 3 weeks until she sees them again. And you know very quickly at the start of this book that it is not going to be 3 weeks, and she's going to be stuck there for a much longer period of time. Sarah is sent to a detention centre with other women, and we follow their mundane, everyday tasks. In that way, it feels like The Handmaid's Tale. So let's do book maths. It's like Severance meets The Handmaid's Tale meets The Centre by Manazir Siddiqui, which is a brilliant book if you haven't read it. The machine that is calculating everyone's risk factor is an algorithm powered by AI, and Sarah is arguing that this algorithm, which has been fed information by humans, has a racial bias to it, and therefore the reason she thinks that she is being kept there is in part due to that racial bias, but she can't express that and be angry about it because that then also feeds their racial bias. So she's stuck in this really difficult loop. And it's also full of bureaucratic nonsense. As I said, bureaucracy is a major theme in this year's prize across the entire list, and I would say it's particularly apparent in this book here. Sarah is even reading Kafka's Metamorphosis at one point, and it felt very serendipitous because when I finished reading this, I ended up picking up Good Girl. I'm talking about this slightly out of order, and Good Girl begins with a quote from Kafka's Metamorphosis. This book is examining the commercialization of mass incarceration, commenting on that especially in the States, and also looking at how failed medical systems abuse people, as in if you have a privatized medical system where drugs companies can make money off you being sick, then they want you to be sick. In the same way, they will want you to stay incarcerated. I felt as though the book fizzled out a little bit towards the end without wanting to give away any plot points, but I wondered if that was a little bit deliberate, as in a massive point of this book is people telling Sarah all the time if she just behaves and toes the line then everything will work out brilliantly, and you're waiting for that payoff in the same way that she's waiting for this payoff, and it never really quite get there, which is not to say it doesn't have a satisfactory ending. It does, but I wondered if that sink in energy was there to reflect how the characters were feeling. I was unsure as to whether or not that worked particularly, but it was interesting to think about. Dreams appear within the book as well, dreams that obviously this government are monitoring, and I like that because you're never really sure if you're in a dream or if you're in her reality. I liked being conned. Obviously, if you're a fan of Black Mirror, you're going to really like this book too, just to add more references to help you find the books that you might want to pick up in this year's prize list. I had hoped that it would finish maybe a chapter earlier than it did, because I was quite delightedly and horrifyingly surprised by something towards the end. And I felt that that was going to be the sucker punch ending, and it wasn't. And I think I would rather have had that ending than the one we got, but that's just me being a picky reader. Yeah, definitely one of my favourites from this list so far. Okay, so we're all caught up on the books that I have finished. I am currently listening to The Persians. Oh, though I do need to talk to you about The Safekeep by Yael van der Woden too, because I read that last year when it was on the Booker Prize longlist. In fact, let me dig out my thoughts from that Booker Prize video and insert them here so that past me can talk to you about the book, because I think I have a recency bias towards the books that I have been reading now, and whilst I really enjoyed The Safekeep,
it faded for me over time. And obviously if I'd read it now for the first time, that wouldn't have happened. So that's something I'm going to have to figure out when I'm working out what books would be on my personal shortlist later. But yeah, here are my thoughts on the Safekeep from last year. I read The Safekeep by Yael van der Weyden, and I finished this one. I really enjoyed it. This one is my favourite from the long list that I have read so far. It's got two things about it that I particularly love in books. It's got some great dinner scenes. We open with a dinner scene with siblings. We've got two brothers and a sister, and one of the brothers is late and he's bringing his new girlfriend with him, and apparently he always brings a new girlfriend with him, and the other siblings are sick of having to make an effort to try and get to know these women when they know they're probably never going to see them again. And there's a lot of really snarky remarks between these siblings. I just thought it was so great. And the other thing that is like catnip to me with this book is that it reminded me quite a lot of Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. You will know if you've been here a while, I'm always looking for books that have that particular feeling. It really is a feeling as opposed to a plot point about this. It is dark and it is queer, and there's quite a lot of secrecy and obsession. So that is why I say it feels quite similar to Notes on a Scandal. So if you've also been looking for a book like that, I present this one to you. I should say that primarily we're following Isabel, who is the sister in this group of siblings. She has two brothers and she lives in their family home on her own, looking after the house. And her brother, who often has these new girlfriends, comes to this family dinner and he says, this is my new girlfriend, this is Eva, and I really need her to come stay at the family home while I go on a work trip. Isabel is extremely annoyed about this, and you think as you're reading it that you understand why she hates this new woman, and then there's always a separate reason for why she hates her that takes you longer to figure out, and I really enjoyed that. And there are so many very funny exchanges between them. Eva came to a standstill. She breathed a few quick times, chest rising. Why are you so determined to dislike me? There's no determination there. I dislike you quite effortlessly. I did laugh quite a lot at that bit. I would say it's very clear from the beginning with Isabel and Eva that they actually quite like each other, and there's lots of sexual tension there. And I did think, oh, for goodness sake, just, you know, let's get things moving here. I enjoyed the chase of these two characters, and that I don't know if it's deliberate, but I feel like there's quite a few references to Call Me By Your Name in this. Tongue-in-cheek, I would say. Like the peach in Call Me By Your Name, there is a pear in this. The pear is not put through quite so much as the peach is in Call Me By Your Name, but yes, I don't know if that's deliberate or not, but it definitely brought Call Me By Your Name to mind. I think one of the things that this book is asking is, what do queer people inherit if they are not part of like a heteronormative structure? How can things be passed on? How can queer narratives be passed on too? Like, how can those survive? I think that is one element of what's being discussed here, and using the inheritance of the family home to discuss that, because both Isabel and her brother Hendrik are queer and their other brother is straight, so he is set to inherit the most because he happens to be straight. So I think that's one of the discussions that's happening in this narrative, but there is a bigger conversation that is happening there too, and I don't want to say anything about that because that is quite spoilery. Well, it's very spoilery, and one of the many fantastic things about this book. So I'm hesitant to say more about it. I will read you a sentence that I have underlined because I've underlined many. There was one here which I thought was a really good description of Eva. Eva took up space with a loud restlessness. A bee stuck in a room with all the windows shut. I feel like you can really feel that as you're reading it, which is always lovely. Deeply unsettling in places, very sexy in others, very layered, and just overall just very well written. I thought that the dialogue was excellent. I thought the reveals were well paced as well. In parts it also reminded me of Claire Fuller's Bitter Orange as well, so if that's a book you've enjoyed, I would also recommend this. Okay, I am going to head off to my hopefully 3 doctor's appointments if everything goes swimmingly and the universe aligns, and I hope I don't get bogged down in bureaucratic nonsense. Let us see, and also let's see what spring-like things I can spy along the way. Come with me on my walk. Not to my smear test, just to the walk. what, I did make all of those appointments and it made me feel like Superwoman. It is, I don't know, 10 days later, maybe 10 days later. And it was a super early morning for me this morning. And we went for a walk in the woods earlier than we would normally. And I have an app that I've been using for a couple of years on my phone called Merlin, which I thought I'd mention if you haven't used it before, but it identifies bird sounds, which is quite fun. I'm trying to get better at knowing them myself, and this is helping me. And because it was earlier, I feel like there were just more birds around, or at least more birds making lots of noises, and there were loads today. It feels like Pokemon for grown-ups. That's how I feel about it. So there was a nuthatch, a crow, a wren, a redwing, blue tits, robins, goldcrests, great tits, woodpeckers, and parakeets. Sometimes we get chiffchaffs as well. Those don't seem to be around all of the time. But yeah, different things every day. And I find it quite fun because I'm in my late 30s. So if you're also in your late 30s and you're finding that kind of thing fun these days, then I would recommend downloading the Merlin app. Anyway, as I said, it's 10 days later. I have 6 books to catch you up on, or at least I'm going to try and talk about as many of those 6 in this clip as I can. If not, I'll talk to you about them the next time I sit down. But out of those 6, we've got 2 that didn't work for me. One that was okay, one that was better than okay, but I wouldn't say was great. One that was good, and one that is a favourite of mine from this list. So let's start from the bottom and move our way up. So I tried somewhere else. I tried this on both audio and physical actually, and just couldn't get into it. It's not that I think the writing style is bad or anything like that, but it may be because it covers quite a lot of ground. So we're moving through decades, and that doesn't always work for me. And for some reason, this just, it wasn't meant to be. So I decided to part ways with that one. Then Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings. This is about family secrets. We open with Deirdre, who's waiting for a delivery of water because that is rationed. And there's a lot of description about how dirty she is, how dirty her apartment is. And in that way, it feels a little bit Atessa Moshfegh. I don't mind descriptions of bodily fluids and all of that stuff, but I know some people do. So if that bothers you, this one won't be for you. I did actually find the story quite compelling. There's a mystery element to it, but there was just something about it that was really putting me off. So Deirdre is a lower limb amputee, and her disability seems to be used in a not too subtle way as a metaphor for everything that's going on in the book, and I don't enjoy that. I will give you an example. He had yogurt for her and spooned it into her mouth, though she could have done it herself. Later, he peeled an archie for them to share, crushing the skin for the nice smell, but really it was to cover the stink of her. That same stink that followed her for years afterwards, just like the itches and shudders that caused her even now to scratch at a thing that had long since been removed. So her leg being removed is a symbol for her family's history and her memories of that, and I just don't like disability being used as a metaphor in that kind of way. You know that if you've been around a while, so I decided that one probably wasn't for me either. Then I read Birding by Ruane. When I first read the beginning of this, I thought, this is very beautiful, and then it became very metaphor heavy, very simile heavy, and a little bit overwrought for my liking. But let me read you the very beginning of it, the bit that I did enjoy. In a small seaside town, autumn is winnowing into winter, and 2 women, strangers, are as yet unaware their lives are about to collide. This town is a sentence of buildings scribbled along the deckled edge of an estuary where the rib cages of old boats jut from the mud at low tide. It's not the way to anywhere else. It is the final stop on the railway line, a place of last years and lost souls. People come here because they've run out of time, or money, or imagination, or hope. Some come here because they're running away. Others have lived in this town so long they can't imagine home being any place but this one. People come here to see the edges and endings of things. I thought that was really gorgeous, but as I got further into the book, it was quite clear that darlings had not been killed. We're following 2 women, so we've got Joyce, who's now in middle age and she still lives with her mum and has never left home, and we've got Lydia, who was famous in the 90s. She was part of a pop duo, and that's quite clearly inspired by the band Tattoo, because they were often told, in air quotes, to les it up by male colleagues who wanted to cause a scandal and really, I guess, get male attention. And now she's being told how damaging that was to the queer community, but also she's realising how damaging that was to herself as a queer person, because now she feels like any queerness that she has that's part of her was performative, which isn't true. So she's feeling very conflicted about the whole thing. The story is set in a rundown seaside town, and both Lydia and Joyce are like the town. They used to either have money or success, and now they don't have those things. They are shadows of their former selves, or shadows of their family's former selves, and they are lamenting that. And it felt as though maybe that was a little bit too on the nose for me, in the same way that Lydia's bandmate is called Pandora, and there's lots of references to boxes, Pandora's box and all of that stuff. It reminded me actually of when I first met Michel Fabre. I think that interview is still on this channel. If it is, I'll link it down below. But he was talking about when he wrote The Crimson Petal and the White for the first time, and in the first couple of drafts he called Sugar Phoenix, and then he realised that that was a bit too obvious and he had to go back and edit that out. And I laughed because when I was writing my first novel, I also called my main character Phoenix and thought that was deeply clever, a rebirthing and all of that, and then realised no, subtlety is maybe a better way to go. So there were just too many things in this book that felt a little bit too laid out on the page, and I would have liked to have been able to do more digging as a reader. It's an exploration of the Me Too movement, and I enjoyed that as well. And I also did like the tongue-in-cheek look at hope in this, because towards the end, which is not a plot point, more just I guess the tone of the book. The tone is, I want to be hopeful because the future looks great. Next year is 2020. I bet all these amazing things are going to happen. And you just think, well, I know what's going to happen in 2020. So you know more than the characters in that respect. And that did make me laugh / feel heavy with them. But yeah, the title of this book is Birding, and it says, the birds will never know that they are metaphors or comprehend that they are poetry to her. The birds are simply bodies moving through space, answering the call inside themselves to survive. Yeah, the birds are them. Not my favourite, I'm afraid, but would be interested to see what this author writes next. Then I read The Artist by Lucy Steed. This is about 3 people. So we've got Tata, who is an artist in France. He's a recluse, he lives in the countryside. Then we have his niece Etty, who lives with him and basically runs his entire life, though he would never admit that was true. Then we've got Joseph, who lives in the UK, who is trying to make it as an art critic. And he writes to Tata asking him if he can come and stay with him and interview him for a piece that he's writing. Tata responds saying, yes, come. So Joseph shows up, and Tata is furious because he has no idea why he's there or who he is, and Etty admits that she responded to the letter and she's invited Joseph there because she thinks that he would be a great person to sit and pose for a new painting that Tata has been wanting to paint for ages, called Man with Orange. So Joseph agrees to sit for this painting, secretly hoping to interview Tata on the sly. That's the premise of this book. For the most part, I felt like I'd read this story before. We've read lots about reclusive artists, especially angry older men who don't appreciate the work done by the women around them. It's set in 1920. There's quite a lot of discussion about the First World War, about characters' relationships with other characters who died or were injured during the First World War. Again, I felt like I'd read that many times before. There wasn't a lot in this to excite me. I wasn't surprised by it. There were some turns towards the end that I thought, that is interesting, but for the most part, I was just kind of trundling along with it and thinking, this is okay. There were, however, a few instances of phrases that stood out as beautiful paintings in and of themselves, and I enjoyed those a lot. So one of them is about Etty going to collect a frame from the village, and it says, it is she who commissions the frame and returns a week later to carry it home, slung over her shoulder as if she herself is a painting. And I can see that so clearly in my head with her, with the picture frame over her shoulder, like she is the art that we should all be looking at. I thought that was gorgeous. And that is also an image that is carried over the rest of the book. Etty is the person that frames the whole narrative for everyone. She orchestrates everything. She sets up the paintings. She decides where objects should be and what those objects should be. And she also puts people in certain situations to encourage conversations so that the narrative can unfold in the way that she would like, within the limitations of her situation. And I thought that that was interesting too. The way that Etty is talked about actually reminded me quite a lot of Agnes's character in Hamnet, and there was a wonderful few paragraphs in this where we learn every single thing that Etty does throughout the day, like a list of all of her chores. And that reminded me a lot of the plague scene in Hamnet, how the plague is passed from someone in, is it Italy? I don't remember, and how that travels all the way back to the UK and ultimately kills one of Shakespeare's children. Like that, for some reason, was what it reminded me of, maybe because I was already thinking about Agnes. I really enjoyed that too. It uses a lot of music and theatre imagery in here too, so the whole thing feels like it's wrapped up in artistic language. And one of the main themes of the book is about impressions of life in various ways, relating to painting or lying, fabricating, writing, and words being removed from the thing that they're describing. And that is interesting too. But again, for the most part, I did feel as though I had read many elements of this story in other books previously, and yeah, it wasn't a favourite for me in the end. Then we're moving into the one that I thought was a lot of fun, and I hadn't thought this was going to be fun actually, because when I started reading it I feared this might be another DNF, but I'm going to have to stop here and talk about the rest later, so I'll see you in a second. I'm coming back to you on the same day. What is this life? Okay, so as I said, this I feared may be a DNF, because it's quite slow to begin with, maybe because we're dealing with lots of characters. Also, it's comedic, and if you don't gel with a book's sense of humour, then there's not much else carrying you, is there? Or at least you feel like you're missing out. But I ended up really quite enjoying this book. So this is The Persians by Sanam Mahloudji, and we're following 3 generations of Iranian women, some of whom left Iran during the Islamic Revolution. The author herself left Iran during the revolution, has lived in the States, and now I think lives in the UK. And we open with Shireen, who is one of the middle generations, and she has been arrested while on holiday for soliciting a police officer, and she is outraged because she is fabulous and rich and important, and her colleagues are worried that this scandal is going to jeopardise her event planning business. She thinks she can get out of this by either throwing money at the situation or being even more flirtatious than before. She is the most outrageous character, and at the beginning I wasn't sure about it, but I honestly feel like she is the gem inside this book. She's just so funny and provides a lot of light relief throughout the book itself. I enjoyed her a lot. There are quite a few parallels between this and Weirdly the Artist by Lucy Steed, in that Elizabeth, who is the older generation, really enjoyed painting and drawing, and the quote that I underlined was, "Reality only gripped her because of the depths of her dreaming." So art is being better than life, wanting to live in that imaginative space. Shireen being arrested at the beginning of this book has her bravado, her persona being put on trial, and more widely the family itself is being put on trial, the family history, as the younger generation start to investigate what they've been told about their past, about their ancestors. And also this dissection flows into discussions on wealth and what's important and lots of things like that. I thought maybe the ending was a little bit too neat, but I did have fun with this book. It did make me giggle in parts, and some of the twists and turns I saw coming, but I didn't mind because maybe I was supposed to see them coming, and it's just the characters who have refused to see but now do. I would ultimately recommend it. Then the one that I absolutely loved, and was actually one of my most anticipated books of the year, even though I've never read anything by this author before, was All Fours by Miranda July. I thought this book was a hoot. This is a book about a semi-famous artist in her mid-40s who is having a bit of a crisis, and she's hilarious because she thinks really ridiculous things very seriously, and sometimes you read those things and you think, oh yes, no, that's tapped into something in me and I understand that, and then she'll go somewhere so outrageous that you just can't follow her. So it's pulling you all over the place and you're never really sure where you are with her. You can't, I was gonna say you can't get comfortable, you are comfortable, but it's just very surprising, and that is what is so joyful about this. So at the beginning she gets a message from a neighbour saying that he saw someone taking photos of her through her window using a long camera lens, and she sits there thinking, I've worried about this happening for a long time, by which I mean I have really hoped that this would happen for a very long time because I want some excitement in my life. This whole thing feels as though she is fantasizing being in
a music video. And we've all been there when we've listened to music and just imagined that, you know, we're in a trailer for something, or, you know, we're on a set somewhere and the music is completely at one with us. That is what she is trying to achieve in her life. And this is reflected in many references to music throughout the book. The main one being that she's been wanting to meet up with a very famous artist who wants her to direct one of her music videos, and this meeting keeps on getting cancelled. The narrator does not want to live in her reality. Her reality feels very stilted to her. She wants something elevated. She wants to step outside of her boundaries. And in order to do that, she decides that when she's supposed to be going to New York and she's decided she's going to drive all the way there instead of flying, what she actually does is drive half an hour down the road, take on, not even a rental, she stays in a motel, and then she decides to completely redecorate this hotel and spend loads of money on making it almost like a set for this version of her life that she wants to live, and she lives there for 2 weeks. It's about fantasies colliding with real life, and the way that I want to pitch this book to you is that it is erotic Wes Anderson. That is how I want to describe it, because there's a lot of reference to colour. Everything is very stylised, and as I said, people say ridiculous things in the most sincere way, and you want to laugh but no one else is laughing and you don't really know what to do. The tone really unsettles you. There is one scene where the main character is shouting across a field to another character that she quite fancies, and he is shouting back to her in this really deadpan way. So they're having this ridiculous conversation out in the open, really far away from each other. And I could just see that on a cinema screen in a Wes Anderson film. So that is what most of the book feels like. And then there's a section in the middle that feels like the book Chrysalis by Anna Metcalfe, which is quite, I suppose, more a niche reference than Wes Anderson, which I think does bring a lot of imagery to mind. But many of you may have read this book because I talked about it a lot a while ago, and because, you know, other people have talked about it too, not just me. But that is a book about a woman reinventing herself, and you don't get to see her from her own perspective, you just get to see it from others around her. And yes, part of this book feels like that, a reinvention of the self. There's a really moving section in this book where the main character reaches out to other women and non-binary people their age and asks them what is the best thing about menopause. And they're so surprised by this question, and then all of these stories and anecdotes start rolling in, and it's clear that they've never been asked this before. They don't get to talk about their desires, and they feel quite ignored and unlabeled, and not always in a liberating kind of way. I just found that section really, really lovely. It made me quite tearful. So yes, sexual freedom of perimenopause, talking about desires and queer bodies and fantasies and the impossibilities of fantasies, the dangers of fantasies, as well as the freedom that they offer. I was just constantly perplexed and bemused in the most delighted way by this tale, and yeah, it's definitely going to make my personal shortlist from this year's prize longlist. So the only book that I have to read now is Amma, which is here, if I can pick it up, there we go. So I'm going to read this book, and then I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about it, and then we can work out which were my favourites and which ones I would personally recommend to you. So I will see you in a couple of days. Hi. I have now completed the reading and we are ending on a high, which is a relief, because if the last book I read was one of my least favourites, it would be a bit of a downer, wouldn't it? But that's not the case. I really loved Amma by Saraid Silva, and I'm pleased that I did, not just because it's the last one and because it's always nice to enjoy books anyway, but because this is a multi-generational family story set across lots of different countries, and as we have established, that doesn't always work for me, mainly because I think when you're covering so much ground in both time and space, you can feel quite a distance between you and the characters, and I want to feel up close and personal. I want to be in their face, I want to be in their heads, I want to be experiencing everything with them. And despite all the different characters and all the different locations, I felt that with this book, which was great, especially because it's only 280 pages. It looks much longer, but that's because it's very high quality, very thick paper, beautiful book. So we are following Josephina, who was born in Singapore and moved to Sri Lanka. Her kids, Sithara and Suri, who were born in Sri Lanka and moved to New Zealand. And Suri then moved to the UK, and then Zara's daughter Annie, who moved from New Zealand to the UK as well. So there's a lot of people that we're dealing with, and it took me a while to get them all situated, especially because they refer to people as Amma, which means mother or mother figure, and that's always someone different for each person, right? So I had to get all of that in my head, and once it was there, I had a great time. There's a lot of trauma in this book. So we begin with Josephina killing her abuser, as it says at the first line of the blurb, in the 1950s when she is only 10 years old. And the most shocking thing about that is, it is the abuse, but is that it's facilitated by her parents. And that is the main theme, or one of the main themes in this book, is violence that is put upon children, either orchestrated by or permitted by their parents. And that is a really difficult read. So there's some really tough stuff in this book, but I don't think that it exploits violence in any way. I mean, my reference point is always A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which I think personally, and this massively divides people and you may disagree, I do not like the way that that book uses trauma and pushes it so far as to make it seem, in many respects, unrealistic. There's a lot of very realistic things in that book, but we don't really have time to get into that discussion today. But if you've been here a long time, you've heard me talk about that book before. But my point is, it doesn't feel like that. This feels like a very measured, realistic look at violence, especially white violence and colonialism, and as I said, inherited trauma. And I thought that it was brilliant. This book also looks at queerness and about coming out and about queer bodies, and there's a lot of imagery relating to hair in this, and I think that's for multiple reasons. Obviously the othering of people of colour via hair and how that can be fetishized almost. That's a difficult word to say. You know the word I'm saying. Fetishized. So I think it's in there for that reason, but also as expressions of queerness and identity. So people shaving their heads, and that may be because they want to be perceived in a certain way, or it may be for a completely different reason for another character that might be related to trauma and a reclaiming of self and body. I love the descriptions in here that would sometimes catch me off guard, because you might have a really beautiful description that feels quite calming. For instance, clothes drying outside in the breeze, and then a character will note how those clothes look like hanged people, and suddenly the whole tone of that paragraph changes and you feel a bit sick. But also there are pleasant surprises within sentences like this. Amma is frowning into the pantry. She is beautiful, although she doesn't seem to care. She has wide eyes and roseful lips, a nipped waist and tiny ankles. Men's eyes follow her with reverence and a touch of resignation, like she is someone else's Christmas present. I love that. There's also some linked imagery, which I really appreciated. At one point there's this sentence: every sentence that comes out of her mouth is a shock. She wants to split the belly of her life open like a fish and pull the guts out, placing them in Ravi's hands. And then towards the end of the book, there's a scene where a character cups someone else's face and then lets them go, and it says it's like they're releasing a little fish back into the sea. And yeah, I really like those paired images. It was really satisfying to notice them, and just showed how much thought and care had been put into the imagery of this book. I would recommend this book for fans of Ponti by Charlene Teo, and also A Place for Us by Fatemeh Farhi and Mirza. Both family dramas, sagas that have worked for me in the past. Ponti also relates to horror films and celebrity. That kind of links in with the book Amma as well, because Annie, who is the youngest generation, she works in the film industry as a stunt double, performing these violent actions as a body double for other people. That's literally her job, but it reflects her situation in her family, this violence that she has been a recipient of in her life because of body doubles, i.e. family members that have come before her. Her job also symbolises her queerness and how she isn't out in the way that she would like to be, especially with her family. So as a stunt double, she's not stopped on the street. People don't say, oh my God, you were in that film, I recognise you, I've seen you. She isn't seen, she isn't known in the way she would like to be, both, I guess, in the industry, but mainly I'm talking about as the representation of her queerness. She is not known. Whereas her uncle, who is now openly queer, lives in London and is married to a man who is a film star. This film star is recognised and seen for who he is. So we have those parallels there too, across the film industry, and also discussing queerness. There's so much to love in this book, and I know I haven't really spoken about plot. I suppose the plot is family secrets and families either reuniting or being torn away from each other. It is about, as I said, white violence. It is about how impossible it is to escape the ripples of colonialism. And I just thought all of these themes were woven together so beautifully. So yes, love this one very much. Okay, so should we do a summary, and then I'll tell you which one would be my winner and which one I also think is going to win. My predicted shortlist, looking at them, sometimes I do two, so I do ones that I think are I know are my favourites from the list, and then a separate 6 that I think will be shortlisted. I don't think I'm going to make any changes actually between the ones I like and the ones that I will predict will be shortlisted, but right. To remind ourselves, these ones didn't particularly work for me for various reasons. There was the Ministry of Time, then we had a little Trickerie, we had Good Girl, we had Somewhere Else, Crooked Seeds, and also Birding. Some of those were books that I didn't finish, some of them I did finish but didn't particularly love. And then I had 3 books that were varying degrees of I really enjoy this, or I can at least appreciate what's in this book even if it's not to my personal taste. There was The Artist by Lucy Steeds, there was Fundamentally by Nasiba Yunus, and there was Sanam Mahloudji's The Persians. So my particular shortlist is this. So we have Amma by Saraid Silva, we have The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami, The Safekeep by Yael van der Voden. When I watched back the footage of me talking about this last year, I remembered how much I loved it. So even though it's faded for me a little bit, simply because I've read so much since then, I know if I had read it now in amongst these books, it would have made my shortlist. So the recency bias can't get to this book. I need to include it in the shortlist. Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell, Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout, and All Fours by Miranda July. So this here is my personal shortlist. I could potentially see, hang on, we need to turn around the Elizabeth Strout, we can't see it. I could potentially see one of these books being switched out for either Fundamentally or The Persians, because the judges might want a greater range in tone, and they are very funny. Though we do have humour in some of these books too, especially I would say in All Fours. But this would be my predicted shortlist. My favourite from this year's list, I think, is Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell. But my prediction for who is going to win this year is Amma. That is my prediction. So we will see what is on the shortlist when it is announced on the 2nd of April. I don't know what's on the shortlist. At the point of filming this, have not been told, so we know the same things right now. I'll be interested to see what has been shortlisted, and then of course the winner is announced normally June, mid-June. So yeah, exciting. I would love to know if you have read any of these, if you would like to pick any of them up, especially after hearing me talk about them. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to throw $1 or £1 in the tip jar over on Patreon, that would be so appreciated. You can tell by the length of this video, I think it's probably about an hour and a half, if not longer. It took a long time to make, and any support you can give me over there would be massively appreciated so that I can keep creating free content on here for you. Thank you so much. If you have made it to this point, give yourselves a pat on the back, please, because I know this has been a long one. I hope you have consumed many cups of tea and many snacks during the duration of this video. I am sending lots of love to you all. Thank you again to Serious Readers for sponsoring the first part of this video, and you can check them out using the link in the description box down below. I will see you all for another video in the not too distant future, and I hope you're all doing okay. I'm sending love. Bye.